one more minute. So we're going to wait for someone else to join us before we start moving forward with this. Okay. All right, this is Opie. Good afternoon. How's everyone? Hi, this is Ope Sotonwa. This is my sign name. It's an O on my chest. Before we start, I want to make sure that we have the interpreters in place. We have CART in place and all the accessibility options. Yes. Okay. All right. Wonderful. Thank you. I'm a Black male. I'm bald. I'm wearing a dark gray suit and an orange shirt. And I'm sitting on a blue chair. And I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the panelists to introduce themselves. One is going to be a little bit late, but they'll be joining soon. So we're going to turn it over to Rogelio. Hi, my name is Rogelio Fernandez. This is my name sign. It's an R on my chest. I'm wearing a gray shirt. I'm seated with a picture in the background, Native American picture and an orange background. Thank you. And Johnny. Hi, I'm Johnny Reininger, Jr. This is my name sign. I'm wearing a bright orange shirt with stripes, gray stripes. And I'm represented Native American. We're actually from a school of survivors whose family haven't found their children. So I'm definitely working today in honor of them. And I want to honor all the tribal recovery acts that are going on right now. I have brown hair, it's long. I'm wearing glasses. I have light skin. I'm Indigenous. This is Ope. Thank you, Johnny. So in this panel, we're going to discuss diversity and equity. And of course, this includes technology as well. I'm going to be starting with some of your experiences that you've had with current technology advances, particularly with COVID. Of course, it's forced us to learn a new way of doing things. And most interpreters are working remotely. And life is a lot different now than it has. Of course, we're hosting this through Zoom, and 3 years ago, we probably wouldn't even think of this possibility. So I'm wondering, do the members in your community feel like they're catching up with current technology? Or is there some things that they are still working on? Hi, this is Johnny. I wanted to let you know that I feel like in rural areas or poor areas, you know that VRS right now, of course, is nationwide. And language and even dialects, vocabulary and dialects vary all over the place. As an Indigenous person, I sign in my label, or sign in my native language, and there's certain things, certain dialects, so I may be giving different terminology or words that interpreters just don't understand. And so it feels we need to set up, I feel like we need to set up something that's regional. So not having interpreters that are all the way from California or New York, because they may not be able to recognize the different tribal languages and dialects that we use. So that's one thing that I wanted to put out there. There's also several other stories that I wanted to share from our group, our Indigenous group that we're working, as well as our Turtle Island hand talk group that we're working with. This is a sign for it. It's not my work. I'm not going to take any ownership, but as a group, we worked on it and I'm willing to share. And of course, we'll answer questions when people start asking more questions. Ope saying, yes, I would like to ask. I definitely have some questions regarding tribal land, but I'm going to switch it over to, turn it over to Rogelio, and he can share some of his comments. Yes, absolutely. Technology has improved over the years. And I think with all of this happening, it makes us start thinking about what we have to do that right by our community in order for all of us to catch up. So for example, when you're thinking about platforms, of course, they're becoming more user-friendly and we're able to reach out to customer service and like a chat room, we could do Twitter. We have chats that we could do on the platform without calling through VRS. So there's a lot more options that we have. But at the same time, there's a lot of issues that come up that can be frustrating. So for example, we don't have Latino representatives on billboards, websites, videos, marketing, ads, and things like that. There's no representation out there where we can feel like we relate with other people or relate with even the issues that are out there. So the information doesn't reflect what I've experienced. So here's an example. There's a lot of hearing parents that are out there who have the opportunity because different companies, they can improve their marketing. There's hearing parents out there who can get information and they go, okay, my deaf child can benefit from this information, and they can hand it over in Spanish or in English or in sign language. And they could do it at an earlier age, which is a lot better than waiting till a lot longer. And there was a lot of kids who haven't learned these things until they're a lot older, particularly about technology. And we want to see that gap be filled. And so these kids can learn at a younger age. I think that's really important. Nobody's saying thank you. I want to add on to that most recent comment. It seems that often technological companies and in the industry, they invent new products and technology with the purpose of supporting people and supporting their needs, especially, but they don't focus on groups with special needs and Latino to translate things into Spanish, just like you just mentioned, with different resources. So I'm wondering if these companies that are out there can start thinking about how they can change their priorities, their DEI priorities, so they can include more people with life experiences, especially when it comes to using these products, instead of not being aware of it and then having to include them later. Do you want to share some thoughts regarding that? Sure, I'll be more than happy to explain my experiences. When I was a young kid, this is Rogelio, I remember looking at the TTY as well as captions. Back in the day, it was this big machine. And I remember talking to my dad, and my parents didn't know English. So there was all this information. They didn't know how much they would have to pay. They had absolutely no idea. So they had to depend on my younger sister as well as my older sister for translation of what that document said. And so that was a missed opportunity. And can you imagine how many Hispanic parents out there are getting something and saying, no, we're not going to get this. And actually, this product may be a benefit for the kid or the family, and it could really improve their reading and writing, language comprehension, accessing things that are on the TV. So from a young age, for me, from now until today, I've been involved in the VRS industry for 17 years. And one thing that I've noticed is there's a lot of companies who aren't really invested in putting out flyers or doing marketing in Spanish. So one of the things is we went over to a trade show. I remember that, and we had a booth, and it was in a Hispanic community. And I said, why don't we have this marketing materials in Spanish? And they said, oh, we don't have the budget for it. It's questionable. This is Opie saying, yeah. So we're going to turn it over to Johnny. I know you mentioned about the tribal lands. And I know that sometimes it becomes a struggle to have accessibility there for the people who live on the tribal lands. So the community is experiencing a gap in needs, particularly when you talk about broadband internet, emergency services like 911 services, and a variety of other things. Can you share with us some of the experiences and some of your thoughts? This is Johnny. Yes, I've experienced several of those issues that are on our reservation. And we call it Indian country. And most of us don't have broadband. We're very limited in what we have access to. And so metros in the city, there's a lot of options that they have. They have high speed internet, but we're limited here. So the download time is really bad. The speed, some of them, they're getting only 2% or 3 megabytes. It's very slow. It's a very low quality. And we can't meet the needs, especially when you need to communicate over a video phone. A video phone would require about 4 to 10 megabytes to be able to keep up with the sign language and make sure that it's smooth without any distractions. So that's one thing that relates to accessibility. And of course, we have TDDs that we're still using to make phone calls. So video phones aren't provided on the reservations. And also the information that's being passed on from the FCC through the tribal government is not effective. And federally, we should recognize some type of collaboration, but because we're not getting a lot of information from the FCC, the tribal government, about our rights and our needs for accessibility, it's not happening. Also, there's a lot of us who we are financially restricted and we just don't have a lot of money. So we call that a lifeline, right? Some of us have experienced this already, having Lifeline, but even Lifeline has limited megabytes that they provide. And so most of the time, it doesn't even qualify. You can't even get video capacity for VRS or VRI all the time. It's very limited in what you can get. So this is something else that we're struggling with too. If Lifeline upped their services and met our needs, I would consider that to be equivalent. But as of now, Lifeline is not considered equivalent services. Not for any of us who are financially restricted. Opie, this is Opie here. I agree with you. Lifeline is definitely not equivalent. It is limited and it's not keeping up with the current technology needs. Technology is requiring high-speed internet and a variety of other things for us to work remotely. And there's a capacity with Lifeline, and that's something that hopefully the FCC and other policymakers will take a look at. It's not only that too, but there are people out there that are living in islands or US territories, Americans as well. And often whenever policymakers, they're more focused on the 50 states alone, which leads to neglecting groups of people that are out there. And so I wanted to move this conversation actually to a different topic. I want to talk about economic justice, and I'll be showing you a brief minute-long film from yesterday where Dr. Leah Cox made a presentation on racism, autism, And there was a couple other points that were made. So if you don't mind turning off your videos so that way we can show the movie. Thank you.
That if we can solve economic inequities, then racial inequities will just go away. However, I believe that we cannot solve economic inequalities until we solve racism in our country. We must begin by looking at the institution of racism. We must look at systems and structures, not just individuals. The term institutional racism
I mean, wow. I mean, that clip right there is so powerful. And it really just shows us we don't really think about those little things, those nuances. And it makes us realize that we have been fighting against racism and we have been fighting for equality, but still the system has been failing us. The system still recognizes that sometimes the policy has been focusing on justice, but we have to think about what the community feels. The community feels that impact. So these are the type of questions that, you should be asking yourself. Yeah, Rogelio is saying, yes, I can definitely see that. I've been doing that in the internship for 17 years and VRS company. So I've been doing that for 17 years and really it's the investors, that's what's hurting us in the end. Our community suffers the most from that. I mean, sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not, but oftentimes it is intentional, unfortunately. I mean, with that mindset, that's where the system breaks down. For example, like equipment, like an iPhone, like you see right here, my iPhone. A lot of people cannot afford extra space on their iPhone. So when they're streaming or downloading photos or anything like that, their space is limited. While the app is increasingly improving itself, where we have to switch out to a different iPhone, upgrade to a better iPhone, and we don't have that privilege to get that. And the iPhone itself is actually fragile. The quality itself can deteriorate over time. So there are a lot of things with that where we will constantly face challenges. I think we need to approach a different type of discussion with the company to make sure that things are affordable, where phones can be at a reduced price. Absolutely.
Mrs. Ope, thank you. Johnny?
I think also with the company, I think they need to kind of attract a diversity of the deaf population. I think they need to think about that when they're developing. Because right now with the video on the webcam, they have an automatic setup where it kind of can contrast itself. But most companies, typically when they initially develop, it's typically towards the white population, and it's made by the white population. So automatically, it doesn't fit for people who are darker skinned. So the people who are POCs, they have to adjust their lighting and kind of have to fit what the company made. So if the company initially just developed that to, fit all types of people during their developing process, and it's not only that, I mean, there's a good example, artificial intelligence. AI nowadays, especially they have like automatic cams where they can have facial recognition. AI has already been developed by, again, white men. And they actually, in that face recognition, they actually miss people who are POC. So already that system is failing that population. And if they just simply have developed that software to include all types of people, that's just one simple fix. I think that's what I wanted to piggyback on that comment.
All right, so one of the things, I know you just mentioned it and some other people are commenting too in the chat room, is capitalism. And it profits. Profits is the number one priority for companies. The second thing that is true is the implicit bias, right?
Definitely.
So we're talking about implicit bias that it's not even recognized within the system. And one of the most biggest reasons why we encourage everybody whenever they're developing products or technology, they need to hire more people of color, more diverse people with diverse experiences, because your lifestyle experiences are different from their life experiences. And we can reframe it by introducing different people, and it helps them reframe their own lens. And it's not through just everyday, right? It's through everyday needs from people of color, sharing their experiences. And of course, you can say, when we're talking about economical justice, we think that'll lead to resolving that. But sometimes it can lead to also tokenism, where they're just putting somebody like a Black person in that space to represent that community. But the structure and the system that's in place at the time is already designed. That means the person's just there, but they're not able to be effective for their community. So we really have to work on breaking down and dismantling and unpacking those systems that are in place, reviewing the things that are in place, just to make sure that everything is appropriate and we have an equitable system for everyone that includes people's experiences. That would be helpful. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts about that?
Rogelio, I definitely agree with that comment. For example, when we have discussions about the policy, oftentimes the policy is made with a white lens. If you notice with any type of product release, my personal opinion, and it should be, we should have a more consistent and similar design. So individuals with different types of experiences, then the beta tester can look at that and have feedback from that. 95% of times we ask for feedback, but we do feel that we suffer from tokenism because they have already decided way back then. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Johnny. Yeah, I just wanted to say, for example, I just recently applied for a beta tester, to be a beta tester, and I noticed they didn't even ask me my identity. So I'm deaf. So they asked me if I had a disability, but they didn't ask me if I was Native American, Indigenous, was I Black? So they said they were selecting at random, just maybe by names. Maybe they see my name, obviously, my name looks white, right? Johnny Reininger. So it's from my father, and so my stepfather. So maybe that's the reason why they're picking that up. Is it based on names? That's something that they need to include more diversity in their research. I'm sorry, I have a cat on the screen, by the way. But yeah, they need to include more diversity within their processes, and they need to when they're hiring beta testers.
Perfect. I wanted to go ahead and give our audience an opportunity to ask questions. So this is to the audience. If you have any questions or comments, we'll try to read through the chat and we'll find those questions out. So right now I'm curious if you guys have some thoughts or advice for tech companies on how to improve their DEI policy plan. And not just, words, but we want to put that into action.
Yeah, this is Johnny. I did recommend for VRS Industries that they should try to refer interpreters who are more regional in the area. And that way they can understand the regional dialects. That's really important. Because if they're getting interpreters from New York, they may interpret something wrong. Or if a person identifies themselves as a doctor and perhaps they're saying some things that are not correct on the tribal group and they're on a phone and the other person is a doctor too, and there's a communication barrier and misunderstandings because the person's going, oh, this is not correct and it's not the right name. And we feel like there needs to be more of a regional setting. Of course, we want to be flexible, but having interpreters from the regional setting would just create more of a way that interpreters can be more accurate. They could say the more appropriate terms, and that way they could identify better with that community.
This is Rogelio speaking. I think we have talked about the DI issues, and I think we just need to be mindful. DEI, yeah, unfortunately, that's a buzzword, right? So we need to challenge ourselves. We need to do what is right for our community. We need to do what's right with individuals with intersectional identities and see what they can benefit from the community, because they're not. I think my suggestion for different companies is to hire more by POC people and to train them and not to set them up for failure automatically. And that change starts now. When you start working on projects, it needs to be right in the start. We don't need to call POCs for feedback after the thought. No, we need to have them at the table with us in the very beginning. And that needs to stop. I encourage anyone who attends, I encourage everyone to attend their local and regional seminars that are on topics of the BIPOC topics. And I think to get out of your comfort zone and meet different types of people, I think that's really going to help you open up your mind. And have these people lead, not be in the background, and not just have, the company, the face of the company type effort. I think you need to have people who are really involved from a POC standpoint. I think that's it for now.
This is okay. Thank you. So I'm looking in the Q&As, and a couple of people have asked questions. One person said, why don't we have any hard of hearing people who are on the panel? And that's, yeah, it's a missed opportunity. So I know TDI probably will make note of that now. And I think for the future conferences, we will definitely plan to add that, but thank you for pointing that out. Secondly, I wanted to mention another question, and I think this was to Rogelio. Why aren't you using spatial sign language in your conversation today, or Spanish sign language in your conversations today? So I just wanted to see what your thoughts were about that. Okay, thank you for sharing with us. And certainly we have to think about people that are providing accessibility to the organizations. Yeah, I operate Mano Communications, and we do translations, Spanish to text and Spanish to English. And we do that in different ways. So for example, we do text in articles, we'll do translation in the medical field in hospitals, in education and things like that. We do a lot of translation work. We also do consulting. So DI training, we hire a lot of different people to do different projects. Yeah. Thank you, Johnny. Do you want to share some of your thoughts too?
Really, I work with a group, a collective group of Indigenous deaf people, and we actually just started Turtle Island. And that focuses on a variety of issues related with our Indigenous people. So as of now, many of us have suffered from language deprivation at a very young age, and that's been a really big struggle for us. Language deprivation is also culture deprivation. So that's where the communication breaks down, especially with our hearing families and even with the deaf community. There's lacking of, the culture and education. So when they go into a mainstream school setting and then get placed into a deaf school, they finally, receive their language, but the opportunity is already lost to be connected with their culture because it was deprived at such a young age. So we try to really educate on a variety of tribes because it's, the issues are not similar for each tribe. For instance, there's one issue of today, like with chiefs and different types of leaders in the tribe. So people do recognize if you're a chief, the belief is that, oh, I'm Indian, okay. They automatically think that I have a chief in my tribe, which for my tribe specifically, we don't have chiefs. So the identity is missed on who I am as an Indigenous person. So that's just one example. There's just a variety of different things. So the idea is that we need to educate the community on what Indigenous is and how many different identities are within that. And there are different cultures that need to be picked up so we can have a stronger framework of what Indigenous is.
This is Opie, thank you. That says a lot too, because it assumptions lead to people having the wrong idea about their identity. And I think it's best to ask, right? Just to ask the person, how do you want to be identified? What do you want to be called? And sometimes people don't want to be identified in that way, and that's okay. They may have their own personal reasons behind that. They may have had a traumatic experience. They may have felt oppressed. They may want to hide, and that's okay. But the thing I want to stress is that anybody who wants to be identified in the correct way, we give them that respect too. And we ask. Okay, let me go ahead and check the Q&A for some more questions. I'm looking now. This is Opie. One of the questions in the Q&A says, could you give some ideas about new products and new technology that has already been developed, but hasn't or doesn't meet BIPOC community needs or disenfranchised, marginalized communities?
Johnny here. Really, I would probably say technology related to the FCC. Like I said, the video automated system doesn't fit BIPOC communities.
Oh, sorry. He was just saying the settings. So he's talking about the contrast. If someone has a dark skin versus light skin.
And like I mentioned, with the settings, it doesn't automatically have that contrast to fit BIPOC communities. So that is one first step that we need to take.
Thank you. Rogelio, do you want to add something? So when I've been involved in the VRS industry, and obviously my family, their first language was Spanish. So CSDVS became ZVRS. And at the time, I remember asking them, telling them that we needed to have ownership, meaning we needed to have our own platform. We needed to have our own way of advertising and marketing. They listened, and they gave us the power to set up whole VRS. And we set that up with Spanish representatives, and some other VRS companies ended up following suit, and they were scrambling to try to get this developed. And I think that that's an important piece for us to consider. Of course, ever since I left, then of course things didn't gain any more traction, because I was the one who was in the company. I was the one that was barking and letting them know to do this. And, you know, our people, our community, we've challenged things for good reasons. We're not just making things up just to do it, to stir up trouble. We want to have a better product. We want to have better services that actually benefits us and benefits the company too. If a company really wants to improve, and if they really want to gain a customer base, they want to focus on their profit margin or whatever, they have to do the right thing by making sure that we're all included.
Yeah. The main focus is privilege, especially a white man-owned company. I think the opportunity to really include, you know, BIPOC communities, that opportunity gets taken by the white men-owned companies. So I think that the opportunity is lacking there. And it's then I question myself, like, where's my opportunity? Where's my American dream? So I'm really hoping that, you know, those people, the white men that own these companies, are sitting in and watching this and thinking to themselves, how can we work with BIPOC communities, and how can we grow in a better way to make a better impact on the community? Because you and I, our life experiences, every single day, we live, see, and breathe it.
Oh yeah.
We know our community. We know it like the back of our hand. And that's what they need to do, is just innovate and help grow with it. But are they really going to do it? Are they really going to mean what they say?
Yeah, this is Rogelio. I just wanted to add to that too. It's not just VRS companies. It's a lot of different companies that they usually get, let's say Black History Month or Latinx Month or Native American Month. If they just celebrate that and recognize that, that's not going to work just by the month. They have to do it year round. That's what we feel. That's when we're going to feel like we're included and welcome to use their services, their products.
Yeah, in front of it, allyship. So that doesn't really represent the whole thing. You know, it has to have some action. Johnny, did you want to add something?
Yeah, not really. No, I don't really have anything to add to that.
Okay, thank you. We'll go back to the Q&A in the chat. So Dana says, so there has to be a better approach to a diversity of people, especially has to attract and have a better approach to all signers, not just a small spectrum, but really the whole spectrum, especially even late signers, late learner signers. We just need to have equality to have accessibility for all deaf and hard of hearing people on the spectrum. And really, there's a lot of people on that spectrum who have different needs. Sometimes they sign as needed, sometimes people mouth what they need. Sometimes they only need captions. There's just so many different needs of deaf people on that range, and it's not all the same. There's one question that's related to the hard of hearing community. I'm curious, are you both familiar with the hard of hearing community and what their needs are, or people who don't sign? Because I know technology can be really frustrating from that standpoint.
Yeah, this is Rogelio. For example, I know there's a lot of people in the Hispanic community who can speak. There's a lot of people who don't know that they can use VCO or CapTel to communicate with their loved ones, friends, businesses. A lot of them just don't know this. And that's a piece that needs to be emphasized more in marketing. And we need to teach people how to use CapTel, VCO. Yeah, I think it's really important that we definitely need to focus on that.
Yeah, Rogelio, I'm actually curious for that equipment, the technology equipment. I noticed that most of the marketing is in English. Do you think that maybe there's a reason why those who are in charge are ignorant about it?
Yeah, we need more Hispanic representation that are in taking action within the videos to show how to use VCO, ZVRS, CapTel, all sorts of different products, just to show how they work and how they operate. Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you. Johnny, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, this is Johnny. I just wanted to mention, as I mentioned before, at ASR, I just learned this room, ASR, automated speech recognition. A lot of people who have accents or did the deaf accent or cultural accents, these accents will also skew how ASR will recognize and change our language. And some of the times it'll include vocabulary that I mentioned too, like some of the vocabulary that I may say markul, or people may wonder how to pronounce that or how to say that. Mavoski, in the English language, it may translate it to that, but I maybe pronounced it differently and I said maskul. So there's a different way for them to say that. And because it doesn't recognize that word. And one interesting story from our Turtle Island group, there was in some regional areas, especially on the Hula VRS on the islands, they had a different type of accent that they would use compared to some of the other people, let's say Mexican people or people in Canada or people in California. There's different accents all over the place. And so there's accent variations. And some of the family members may not understand that accent. So one of the things I want to stress again, it's important to have more regional representation, especially when it comes to translation within the VRS industry. Also, we need to look at video phones. No, what do you call that? It's that the IP, it's the video interpreters. So the VIs, that's what it's called. So the VIs, they need to be more regional based instead of coming from all over the place.
Rogelio, I just wanted to add something to that. I wanted to talk about regional signing and also with regional dialects and even with different states and different countries. I've noticed when VRS was initially established, the VRS company itself actually had a very high expectation of how they hired their interpreters. They had to be certified. But as the VRS rate dropped, they became more lenient on their hiring screening process for interpreters. So they were actually hiring interpreters straight from graduating programs. So they were novice interpreters. So the quality deteriorated rapidly. So yeah, the ability to interpret and to receive different type of regional signs has gone down. Yeah, I've noticed the quality has gone down for sure.
Yeah, this is Opie. I want to share something with you too. So whenever I first moved here to America, I moved from Nigeria, and I liked to, sometimes I'd speak for myself, I'd sign as well. And I lived in the DC area and I would speak for myself. Most people understood my accent. It's a thick accent. The challenges for me was moving into another part of the country. So Missouri and Kentucky, and people there wouldn't understand me. And there would be, I would feel somewhat deflated. And then sometimes even with my signing, I would use a different sign for something. It wasn't maybe very ASL. And it would include some people who, you know, it would include some BSL too, some Black Sign Language. And that led to a whole nother issue within our community where there's a feeling with our freedom to express ourselves with language that we're most comfortable with is not theirs. So I wanted to know what your experiences were with that within your community.
Yeah, I mean, we experience the same thing, Johnny here, by the way, especially for Indigenous, deaf, and hard of hearing people included. You know, there are a variety of accents and variety of signing accents, as you would call it. So there are the more traditional Indigenous signing style. You know, like I just sign people, and then this sign where you have your index finger and thumb signing people. There are different ways to sign people, and I'm not a huge fan of that, but anyways. So would interpreters themselves be able to catch that? Would ASR be able to recognize that? I'm not sure, just because of the variety that's included.
Yeah, this is Rogelio. In our Hispanic community, we've just experienced discrimination, people mocking us for our signing. For example, Chile, this is our sign for it. In the Latino community, this is what we want to sign, but other people say, no, you have to sign it this specific way. Is ASL a white dominated sign? And that's not how we sign it. So that's just one example. And there's a lot of regional dialects, and we're constantly getting criticized for these ways that we sign things.
I'll be here. I'm just hoping people who are watching this right now can really, you just recognize that there is a huge bias, and we have lived with discrimination, and it's subtle discrimination as well. You know, we have to live in a hearing world, and our community can do better. You know, I'm going to look at the Q&A just a little bit more. Hang on one second. One question is, many people aren't sure on how they become good allies to everyone, so including us in the community of, you know, deaf people. So maybe there's not a familiarity with our community, so they're not sure on how to respond, and how that response can help support our community. So there was a suggestion on a radical book. You can actually purchase this book. So this suggests that Jim himself, a CDI board president.
Yeah, this is Rogelio. Can I add to that?
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Okay. You know, often we think by just reading a book that we're going to automatically improve our unpacking or understanding of ourselves. It's not going to happen. What we need to intermingle with different groups of people. And from there, you'll get called out, and you'll get called out in different ways. There's different levels, and you'll automatically start improving. So I encourage you just to do more, not just read a book.
Right, I agree. I think that's also part of what Leah Cox was saying and what she was sharing yesterday, is that there's not enough resist. We have to act on that resist. We have to be anti-racist. So that is the biggest thing, is to interact with different groups of people who have experienced discrimination at firsthand. Thank you, Rogelio, for that comment. I think there was another question. Let's see. So COVID has really forced people to be to kind of integrate into a more technological sense, so using Zoom. So speaking of, with telehealth and that system, do you think that there are more users, especially for BIPOC interpreters? Are they more available during this time where there are more BIPOC customers? Or are they just limited to interpreters that are state-based? You know, technology really unleashes a plethora of possibilities of allowing any type of interpreter to work, and we can really enhance that experience for consumers to accommodate, to have an appropriate fit for consumers, especially virtually rather than face-to-face. Does that make sense? I mean, through technology, isn't that an easier way to access?
This is Johnny. So an example with Turtle Island, we have interpreters. We have an interpreter protocol for Indigenous people. And what we do is we have a list of guidelines that we recommend for interpreters. And I doubt there's many interpreters who would even understand that. I mean, we're diverse. We come from different tribes. We come from even different beliefs. We have different sacred religions and concepts that we hold. There's a lot of differences with all of us, and a lot of interpreters don't understand that. And so when they come to interpret, even with VRI, let's say a VRI setting, how would they even know? They've never been here, so they don't have that experience. And there's not many Indigenous people who would be even in their state, probably. And so how would they ever even experience what it's like to live in our shoes? And so it's impossible. Living in the state in Oklahoma, this is where I'm at right now in the state, and I understand it. I've walked through our shoes. You know, if you live here, those people could be better allies for someone who's interpreting instead of someone from another state who's never understood what it's like.
Thank you so much. Rogelio, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to answer. I actually have two different answers that I wanted to provide for that. So yes, technology is improving, which means more interpreters can work from home. And that means the pool of interpreters it's definitely bigger, which is a great thing for qualified interpreters. But another thing is the interpreter training programs, the curriculum, the training that goes into it, the pipeline that's out there for years and years. It takes years and years. So the ability to recruit BIPOC interpreters is just not in place yet. So I'm going to give you an example. My sisters signed really good. And recently, I would say before I set up my business, my two sisters said, "Oh, I didn't realize that I could become an interpreter or a translator." And I said, "Yes, of course." And that hit me hard when they said that. That means they never had a recruiter or a marketer, anybody out there, anything visible for them to say, I could be an interpreter at a young age. They didn't even know. So that was one other piece of feedback that I had for different companies out there for interpreter training programs, just to make sure that your curriculum is revised so it can accommodate and fit BIPOC people, and so they can recruit more BIPOC interpreters for us.
Oh, thank you so much for that. Yeah, really, it's the pool of interpreters. It is for BIPOC interpreters is very limited. I know a few Black interpreters themselves have been in the works of developing a dictionary for BIPOC interpreters specifically, all around. So it kind of gives that access for BIPOC interpreters to see who they need to network with and to kind of gain some jargon and knowledge to, you know, set themselves up for success. I'm actually looking at the time. We have 5 minutes left. Do you have any final comments or anything to share before we wrap this up? Johnny, how about you?
All right. Well, stories are really important, especially in the process of just developing policies. Really, stories are vital. Let me give you an example. So Indigenous people, a long time ago, already had a lot of technology. We had smoke signals that were developed that would be able to signal people and share information. It was already there a long time ago at the time. And those stories still translate to today. What's so important is that knowledge base and that understanding of the story. And you start listening to those, and it'll start improving your product and it'll improve your services. It'll also allow you to develop products in the development process. If you don't gather all the stories beforehand and you think everything is fine and you start developing your product for your customers, and this is just not one story, this is a variety of stories that you have to include to make sure that you're considering all diverse perspectives.
Yeah, I understand that, it's competitive, companies competing with each other. That's important. I understand that from a business standpoint. But I think what I want to ask of companies to do is to do the right thing by the community, to give back to the community, and start by hiring BIPOC people. I think it really just starts into the hiring process. Really, I think we have to be consistent with your efforts is really what I want to say.
Thank you to the both of you for sharing your knowledge, your experience, and as well as representing your community. I'm sure there's a lot of people here who are in the community who are learning, and I've learned new things, and I'm sure they're learning about how they can support the community and how they can become better allies, not only doing performative allyship, but also getting engaged. I wanted to thank our audience for joining us, especially with all the comments that you made and the questions you made in the chat. I wish I could have time to answer all the questions that are out there. Of course, we have a limited amount of time. I also wanted to thank